Hello, we're Open Doors Metropolitan Community Church in Seoul, Korea, and this is our YouTube channel. We're a community seeking to live out the radically inclusive love of Jesus the Christ. We are a faith community of the Progressive Christian Alliance and an emerging church of metropolitan community churches. Please join us now for excerpts from the service held on Sunday, August 21st, 2016, the 14th Sunday after Pentecost. The theme of the service is How Can We Be Sure? And the preacher is the Reverend Craig Bartlett. Anyone who's going through a crisis or a period of uncertainty in their faith journey may find this sermon helpful. I hope you will.
Let's pray. God of power and justice, like Jeremiah, you weep over those who wander from you. Turn aside to other gods and enter into chaos and destruction. By your tears and through your mercy, teach us your ways and write them on our hearts, so that we may follow faithfully the path you show us. Amen. The first reading comes from the book of the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 1, reading verses 4 to 10. As is our custom, anyone who would like to volunteer to read, may do so.
Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Ah, Lord God, truly do not know how to speak, for I am only a boy. But the Lord said to me, Do not say I am only a boy, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and you shall speak whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord. Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, Now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant.
The second reading comes from the letter to the Hebrews, the 11th chapter, beginning to read at the 29th verse, reading to the second verse of chapter 12. I freely admit I'm playing a little fast and loose with the lectionary this week because this was actually the second reading from last week's lectionary comments, but I found that it fit in well with what I needed to say, so... By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. But when the Egyptians attempted to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received the spies in peace. What more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death, they were sawn in two, they were killed by the sword. They went about in skin of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, and in caves and holes in the ground. Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Thanks be to God.
Please pray. God, may I never lightly presume to preach your word, and may we never lightly presume to hear it. For your word is light and life eternal. I've had the good fortune this week of watching a couple of movies with faith themes, which have been very instructive to me. One of them I'm going to refer to extensively in this sermon. The other one, well, I'll save that one for another time, but I'll just say that it's a movie that I've waited almost 20 years to see, and boy am I glad that I saw it. But the first one, the one that I'm going to talk about today, is the film adaptation of a novel by a French writer named Georges Bernanos called Journal d'un curé de campagne. And it was adapted by Robert Bresson, and we know it by its English title, Diary of a Country Priest. And it concerns the work and trials of a young priest just out of seminary, going to his first parish in a northern French village called Abricourt. And this role, the role of the priest, is played with stoic precision by this man. His name is Claude Ledoux, and he went on later to actually do a lot of children's television in France. And so, but this was a very somber role that he played. The priest he portrays is young, earnest, but he's also socially inept. He visits all his parishioners regularly, but finds it almost impossible to form relationships with them. He carries out all his priestly obligations, but finds it difficult to pray. In moments of despair, he writes in his journal, "God has left me." And because of his ineptness, he's an easy target for vilification by the locals. He tries to conduct catechism classes for the young people in the village, but the girls only wish to tease him about his eyes. He has
he has terrible gastric problems, stomach problems, so he subsists on a diet of potato soup and dry bread soaked in sweetened wine. Sacramental enough for you? And because of that, the locals begin gossiping that he's a drunkard. A man whose wife has just died browbeats the young priest for simply asking for the standard church fees for burial, and basically bullies him and dictates to him, this is the price you're going to pay me, and not one sou more.
Of course, and back in the days when they still had French francs.
The daughter of the local count visits him with evidence of her father's indiscretion with her governess. He's basically carrying on an affair with her. And when he refuses to join with her in incriminating him, she spreads rumors that he's guilty of indiscretions. He speaks to the local count about plans that he has, about creating recreational programs for the young people, and the count gives him a cool reception saying, don't move so quickly. And he talks about his predicament with his nearest colleague, the pastor of the nearby village of Tosi. He ends up just being berated by his older fellow priest. And I quote from his speech. He says, I'm wondering what have you got, young men got in your veins these days? In my time they made men of the church leaders, of parishes, real masters. Seminaries these days send us choir boys, young ragamuffins. They think that they do so much because they never get anything finished. Don't wait for your parishioners to love you, he tells his young mentee. Get them to respect you, to obey you. For night will soon come soon enough and undo the deeds of the day. And how often have we experienced this to any degree in our lives? What times in our lives have our work and our deeds been misunderstood, underappreciated, or even deliberately misrepresented? How often have people's faults and missteps become amplified to being sins of the worst kind which no person in his or her right mind would commit? How often do we experience in our lives that the trust we looked for, the trust that we thought was there between us and other people, went missing? Or in some cases, never really was there. How often do we want so much to engage the world but feel like the world just passes us by, almost oblivious to our existence? We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. We don't know what we could possibly offer to others that would make a difference. Well, Jeremiah's excuse was, he was a boy. I'm only a boy. I'm too young to have any influence. He even claims, I wouldn't even know what to say.
the divine response is, don't you worry about that. The words you speak will be mine. And so, the young priest of Abricourt goes to the countess to talk about the family, the family conflict that they all seem to be mired in. As for the countess, well, she cares nothing for her husband's indiscretions, and for his daughter's rash nature. For her daughter's rash nature. Because she is still engrossed in grief over the loss of her young son. And she challenges the young priest and asks, what counsel can you possibly give me when God seeks to torture me like this? And out of nowhere, the priest finds words to say, and he says, God is no torturer. And when she asks, God, is not God the master of love? He answers, no. God is not the master of love. God is love. They go back and forth until finally she begs for guidance. What must I say? What would you have me say? He responds, you must say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. She confesses that if she could take herself and her son to a place, and she says, in this world or the other, someplace free from God, if it meant suffering and death every second eternally, I would carry my son to that place and would say to God, do your worst and crush us. She expects condemnation from the priest. He simply responds, I have felt that way too. There's only one kingdom, the kingdom of God, and you and your son are part of it. And then what you could say is probably the climactic scene of the movie. She collapses on her knees, removes the amulet that she's been wearing with her son's picture in it, and throws it into the fireplace of her room. Now, we might think of this as a sign of resignation, a sign of giving up, a sign of defeat. But it is not that. She later writes to the priest in a personal letter that in their conversation, she found peace. In spite of this, the poor chap can't win for losing, as we say. The Countess's daughter overhears the conversation, and she paints it as a conversation where the priest was confronting her mother and causing her great anguish, which in effect caused her death 2 days later. The Count turns on him, telling him not to interfere in his family's affairs. In fact, a vicar from a nearby parish comes by and says that the bishop has this man's ear. This man has the bishop's ear, and you're likely to be transferred.
When the priest's health takes a turn for the worst, a local woman gives him a hot drink, and he finds out later that that drink was most likely poisoned. What more must he endure? Well, this young man can take his place with the anti-heroes of faith, which were mentioned in our second reading from Hebrews. Throughout what we call chapter 11, the author goes through a list of all the great people of faith who trusted in God, and who throughout the history of Israel, of God's people, were able to have great blessings, were able to bring about a nation. And we heard about some of those. We heard about some of those great heroes of the faith today. But the author is also unafraid to bring up what we might call the anti-heroes of the faith as well. If I need to remind you, ones who were tortured, suffered mocking and flogging, even chains and imprisonment, stoned to death, sawn in two, killed by the sword, went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, wandered in deserts, in mountains, and in caves, and in holes of the ground, of whom the world was not worthy. A reminder to us that following in the way of faith can sometimes bring just as much downward mobility as it can upward mobility. Sometimes we have to accept that the world is a capricious place, and things happen for reasons that they have no reason. Or if they have a reason, it is because of the machinations of humans who put certain systems into play, and those systems are together, which in effect keep people down and dehumanize them. I remember going back to my old workplace one day on a Sunday afternoon from being in church, and I was with a fellow colleague, and she goes to a different church, and probably guess what kind of church it is, and we were talking about why things have happened, why we moved from a place which was really nice in Sungnam, in the suburbs of Seoul, to this place, Ihwan Ri, John Ho Won-up, as I like to remind you, what I affectionately call Dog River, place being 10 miles from the middle of nowhere. And she was there saying, but no, God's in control of everything. He's in control of everything. He has a plan. He's put us here for a reason. My poor, poor child. How much you have to learn about the capriciousness of the world. One thing I will agree with her on about was whatever we think of the circumstances we're in, whether we think that they're of our making, or whether they are beyond our control, or whether they are the result of forces beyond our control, or whether it just happens to be the way the world works on any given day. The question becomes not why God, but I would suggest what God. What shall I learn from this? What shall I take from this? And so the young priest prepares to leave his parish in Ambricourt, uncertain of his future. He's going to travel to the city of Lille to get a medical diagnosis for his stomach pain. The priest of Tossy comes to visit him for one last visit. And he says to him, "You're a good young priest." And the young priest says to him before he leaves, "Please give me your blessing." The priest of Tossy says, "No. Today, I need your blessing." He travels to Lille unburdened. He's been set free of the burdens. As a result of his work, he knows the truth of what he has done. And it doesn't matter what anyone says. It doesn't matter what happens to him afterwards, whether he gets kicked out of Ambricourt. He has a certain freedom now. Now, unfortunately, when he reaches Lille, he receives a diagnosis of stomach cancer. He's attended to by a former classmate of his who's left the priesthood and now works as a druggist. He eventually dies in a small room. But he has that inner peace. He has endured the worst of what Ambricourt has offered him. He's been able to speak truth when it needs to be spoken. He's been able to speak words which bring peace to those who need it. And he has received affirmation from someone who was once his harshest critic. And when he dies, his last words to his friend are, "What does it matter? All is grace." Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. Let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Amen.
All is grace. That's what we're about at Open Doors Metropolitan Community Church. So, we hope you won't just watch, but also participate in our life as a faith community. All are welcome to join us in our worship and our ministry. Age, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, ethnicity, ability, and economic status are not barriers to participation. This is what we mean when we say radically inclusive. We worship at 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings in the Haebangchon district in Seoul. For more information about us, our location, and our ministry activities, please check our website at www.opendooorskorea.org. We hope to see you soon.